In determining the reliability of the doctrine of polygamy and the founding documents it comes from, we need to take a timeline approach. So here's the beginning of the timeline in 1830, when, of course, the Book of Mormon is published, and when the church is born, basically. 1847 here is the generally accepted year that the church starts in Utah, and then out to 1890, which is considered the end of the polygamist age. So here's where polygamy is active in the church. Where's the doctrine that it comes from? Let's first look at the Book of Mormon and find out if it's documented there someplace. You look in the 1830 version, followed by the 37 and the 1840, and you look for polygamy, but you do find this. In the 1830 version, it says, "For there shall not any man among you have, save it be one wife, and concubines ye shall have none." Jacob 2:27. And not only is that in the 1830 edition, it goes to the 37 and the 1840, even through the 1920 and 1981 edition. It's still with us to this very day. That's not pro-polygamy, it's against polygamy. Okay, so we're looking in the wrong place. Let's try someplace else. Actually, if you look up around 1835, you have the first publication of the Doctrine and Covenants, which originally was called the Book of Commandments or the Book of Covenants. Maybe polygamy is in there. The 1835 edition is published, and the 1844 edition comes after it. What do you find in the 1835 edition when it comes to marriage? Well, you find Section 101 in the 1835 edition on marriage, and hey, this is probably a good place to look. So let's blow this up. It's page 251 in that particular year, and we go down, let's see, past this point to verse 4, and you read this. You read, "Inasmuch as this church of Christ has been reproached with the crime of fornication and polygamy," okay, we're in the right place, "we declare that we believe that one man should have one wife." Wait a second. "And one woman but one husband, except in the case of death when neither is at liberty to marry again." So this isn't a pro-polygamy doctrine. This is an anti-polygamy doctrine. It says one man should have one wife. But it does give us an interesting piece of information. As of 1835, when this was published, evidently public accusations had come against the church for fornication and polygamy. So this gives us one data point that at least it was active in 1835. But Doctrine and Covenants doesn't support it. It actually goes against it. Our thanks, by the way, to the Institute of Religious Research for giving us a photocopy of this page. So now we have a problem. The 1835 and 44 edition, followed by the 1845 edition and the 54 edition, which is used here in Salt Lake. Does this document, do all these subsequent editions have this 101, which is against polygamy? Well, sure enough, it does. Section 101 persists all the way out into the 1870s, all through the period of time where polygamy is very active, not only in the Midwest in the church, but also in Utah. By the way, too, the 1854 edition renumbers 101 to be 109, but it says the same thing. One man should have one wife. Now, this is troubling, especially if you superimpose the lifetime of Joseph Smith on this. He died in 1844 in a gun battle where he killed 2 other men before he died. But the 2 reigning documents that hold the doctrine for the church both say that polygamy is wrong and one man should always have one wife. So there must be some other document we're missing that tells us why they did polygamy. And sure enough, when you get to the year 1843, you find something happening. We get this from the History of the Church, from the introduction to Volume 5, penned by William Clayton. And he says this: "On the morning of the 12th of July, 1843, Joseph and Hiram Smith came into the office. They were talking on the subject of plural marriage." Okay, we're in the right place. Hiram said to Joseph, "If you will write the revelation on celestial marriage," by the way, notice they're using that synonymous to plural marriage. "If you will write the revelation on celestial marriage, I will take it, read it to Emma, and I believe I can convince her of its truth, and you will hereafter have peace." I guess Joseph Smith didn't have peace at his house. So Joseph smiled and remarked, "You do not know Emma as well as I do." And Joseph then said, "Well, I will write the revelation, and we shall see." Hiram then took the revelation to read to Emma. Joseph remained with me in the office until Hiram returned. When he came back, Joseph asked how he had succeeded, and Hiram replied that he had never received a more severe talking to in his life. Joseph quietly remarked, "I told you you did not know Emma as well as I did." Joseph then put the revelation in his pocket. Now, 2 or 3 days after the revelation was written, Joseph related to me and several others that Emma had so teased and urgently entreated him for the privilege of destroying it that he became so weary of her teasing, and to get rid of her annoyance, he told her she might destroy it. And she had done so, but he had consented to her wish in this matter to pacify her, realizing that he could rewrite it at any time if necessary. Wow, seems like Joseph was having some real problems at home. You know, we gain a little bit more information directly from Brigham Young in the Journal of Discourses, volume 17, and he writes about this event. Emma took that revelation, supposing she had all there was, but Joseph had wisdom enough to take care of it, and he had handed the revelation to Bishop Whitney, and he wrote it all off. He made a copy. She went to the fireplace and put it in and put the candle under it and burnt it, and she thought that was the end of it. And she will be damned as sure as she is a living woman. Joseph used to say that he would have her hereafter if he had to go to hell for her, and he will have to go to hell for her as sure as he ever gets her. Lots of problems at home, especially with Emma. Whew. But the issue is, why bring it out now in 1843? And you can find this pretty easily if you just plot how many wives Joseph has by the time the revelation comes to the surface. Starting around 1840, he has one or two. It's hard to plot wives, but then as 1842 and 1843 come around, by the time of July 12, 1843, according to the most recent research by George Smith, Joseph Smith has 28 wives. That's why he's having problems with Emma at home. Well, many people who look at this say, well, this is clear evidence then that Joseph must have had the revelation prior to writing it down on July 12th. And that's why he was taking all these wives sort of secretly, because he had the revelation, but it just hadn't become public and written down. But according to Joseph's own words, that's wrong. He didn't have the revelation until that very day. You go to History of the Church, Volume 5, page 500 and 501, and this is what Joseph Smith writes. Wednesday the 12th, I received the following revelation in the presence of my brother Hiram and Elder William Clayton. I received, didn't just transcribe it. And he entitled it, The Revelation on the Eternity of the Marriage Covenant, including the plurality of wives, given through Joseph the Seer in Nauvoo, Hancock County, Illinois, July 12, 1843. So he received it on that day, but he already had 28 wives. Well, what's in this revelation on the eternity of the marriage covenant, including the plurality of wives? Just a few snippets right here. Here's one. Abraham received concubines, and they bore him children, and it was accounted unto him for righteousness. Another place, and let mine handmaid Emma Smith receive all those who have been given unto my servant Joseph. Notice the past tense, so he's even admitting here that he already had wives before the revelation. Also it says, but if Emma will not abide this commandment, she shall be destroyed, saith the Lord. Another place, let no one therefore set on my servant Joseph, which means get off his back, basically, about all this kind of stuff. And if he have 10 virgins given unto him by this law, he cannot commit adultery, for they belong to him. So this is what was brought to Emma Smith to get her to accept the 28 wives that he had at the time. Well, so what happens to this particular revelation on the eternity of the marriage covenant, including the plurality of wives? Well, a year later, Joseph Smith is dead, dying at the hands of gunmen after he has killed 2 other people. But the document itself, what happens to it? Does it get rolled into the Doctrine and Covenants and then becomes a ruling source of doctrine for the church? Well, let's go back to our timeline. We'll put the Book of Mormon back on down here through its various editions, and I'll also overlay the Doctrine and Covenants through its various editions. Well, the 1844 edition happens a year after this public revelation on polygamy comes out. Does it come into that publication, that edition? In fact, it doesn't. It stays undercover until 1852 in Salt Lake City. And at that point, it really comes out in public. It's read in public, it's waived in public, and even special conferences are established to talk about it in public. And this is really the heyday of polygamy in Utah, Mormonism. But the document itself never gets put into the Doctrine and Covenants. It just floats around as kind of an independent document until about 1876, when they get ready to publish the next edition of Doctrine and Covenants. And now we're at a crossroads, because if you go back and look at the 1835 edition with Section 101, it's still in the 1854 edition when you get to the time they're ready to do another edition of Doctrine and Covenants. So what do you do? Because on the books throughout this entire period of very active polygamy, Doctrine and Covenants 101 says one man should have one wife. So, of course, what happens is the doctrine of polygamy is going to be put in the 1876 edition, and it comes through here, it gets put in 76, and to avoid the controversy of the conflict, 101 is dropped. And then we have the birth of Section 132, the principle and the doctrine of their having many wives and concubines. Well, that seems to solve the conflict, at least in the Doctrine and Covenants, but it doesn't solve the conflict with the fact that Jacob 2:27 still says you should have one wife. Well, to round out the whole picture of the doctrine, you get to 1890, and you have President Woodruff's manifesto that moves away from polygamy practice, and it starts off with these very powerful words to the saints, to whom it may concern. Later on, he says, we're not teaching polygamy or plural marriage, even though it's still heavily entrenched in D&C 132. And at the very end, he finally says, my advice to Latter-day Saints is to refrain. My advice is to refrain. Not very strong language. Anyway, this ends up getting wound into the publications of Doctrine and Covenants as an official declaration, and that's where the official sacred texts relating to polygamy sit this very day.